Welcome, 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 everyone, to our February Sanctuary Book Club. We're excited to see all y'all, and you might be wondering, why are Cheryl and I, the backgrounds look so different than Texas? Because we're in Michigan. Oh, long story, but we're back up here. I think we now live in the Venza. So it's we live in a tiny house, we live in a car, and we live in my mother's house. So it's, that's the way you are when you're 16. What do they call us, Cheryl? Unhoused. We're not homeless, we're unhoused. Or we're between houses a lot. Anyway, it's looking, like I said, good to see all y'all here. And Cheryl, I give this mighty good looking group to your care for the next hour.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Crossing to Safety by Wallace Stegner. All right. Kelly asked one of the questions that I was going to ask. Who suggested this book? I don't remember. Do you guys remember who suggested this book?
There were 3 books suggested.
Yeah.
And
I thought it was Bud.
Oh,
I think so too.
So where is he?
Yeah, where is he? I want to talk to him about this.
Yeah, really. Well, let's just say, what were your impressions of the book? Let's start with that.
Oh, gosh.
Or most of the book, Kelly and Kristen.
Well, there were a lot of intertwining things going on. And it was also nice to see 2 couples very different, but to constantly intertwine their lives. And one went down financially, and the other supported them, without being overtly, giving money, which I always find fascinating. There's so many ways to help people.
Yeah.
And we don't always recognize that, like offering housing and, things like that. Because they both were proud professors, and if they'd done too much, I think they wouldn't have accepted it. But I liked that about the book. It was interesting and intertwined the activities of the 2 couples. When I first started reading it, I knew it was set in Madison, Wisconsin, and I have a dear friend from high school and college that lives there. But then I realized that really wasn't too much of the heart of the story. It was, more about being professors, and then the outdoor part of it was beautiful, I thought.
Yeah. Well, that's where Rose and Carol live.
Yeah, we're in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
I did live in Madison for a year. It's a really great city. Good.
I believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it was interesting reading their experiences in Madison about the cold there and everything. One of the things that struck me about the book was that about the 2 women in it. Where would they be without having their husbands? I just thought about that. Because they were, one was very rich and everything, but they really lived their lives through their husbands. That's how I pictured it. And there were some words of wisdom in the book, like near the beginning, it talked about how in the beginning we're going to leave our mark on the world. We're going to go out there and do great things. And then what really happens is the world leaves marks on you. So anyway, there were some things like that I thought were really good.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the women, and this was during, at least the book started during the Depression, right? So this was
right. Many years ago. But that's when women did, did lead their lives around whatever their husband was doing.
Right.
I thought those 2 women were very lucky because they could have had husbands who had, really dark personalities and abusive. But they kind of lucked out with
these were also educated women. These were not, these were women of education who found their husbands in a scholarly world.
Well, yeah.
And supported them as scholars. So I think these men were very lucky to find women who were not just content, but supportive and wanting them to write poems and novels and scholarly works, and who saw that as real work in a time in the country when, so many people were scavenging for their next meal.
There was one
Support
thing
that
with
kind of work.
the aunt of the rich woman. She, when the rich woman was thinking of marrying her rich husband, her aunt said to her, look, this isn't really a good match. And a lot of times what happens is that you'll get married to someone who, is in education, and then you'll end up working. Actually, it wasn't for the rich person. It was the other lady.
No, I think you're right. It was because she wasn't as rich as he was, but he played it off as being poor. And then suddenly the marriage was approved when Aunt Emily realized he was
I thought that was really interesting. That person had that foresight to see what the situations might become. So, all right.
Yeah.
Of all the books that we've read, this is my favorite so far. It took me twice as long to read this book as any other book that we've had, because I usually can speed read, a lot of things. This book is so amazingly, beautifully written that I just pored over every word. And many times I would go back and read the same page 2 or 3 times, just because it was so, I'm a fledgling writer, and to read something like this made me want to just forget about writing forever, because I could never, ever, approach anything like this before. This is one of probably the 10 best books I've ever read in my life.
Really?
It includes thousands of books.
Wow.
This is just the most beautifully written and constructed book that I have read in a very long time. I loved every page of it. I wanted to know who recommended it, just to thank them, because I would never have found this book. It's not a new book.
No,
It's an older book.
Yeah.
But it was voted by some very prestigious group as one of the 10 best novels of the 20th in English in the 20th century.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And so that that tells you something, right there. But I just was amazed by this book, and I loved every page of it. And it was very personal for me, if I can say this in this way. I was married to Charity Lang for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
My ex-wife, if you set out to write a character to describe who my ex-wife was, you could not possibly get any closer than Charity Lang in this book.
Wow.
It just, every page was just so personal, to me for that. My ex-wife was gorgeous. She was an international beauty queen. She just was bigger than life. She just filled up the world wherever she was. She, like Charity Lang, she made lists every day for everything. She planned everything in great detail, not just for herself, but for everybody else in the world, and tried to control everything, to the extent, that she could. It's just every page just totally stunned me, because Charity is so much. And I was hoping that Bud would be here, because Bud knew her very well, knew my ex-wife very well for years before she passed away. And I just wanted to get his take, sort of on that too. The only difference was in the book, Charity kind of dominates Sid in a kind of an unhealthy way and considers him incompetent and all of that. And my ex-wife was nothing like that. She was my biggest fan and supporters when we were married and then after we were divorced. But in every other way, honest to God, it was like reading her biography.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, Kay, you think Christy gave us that book, possibly?
Yeah,
I think you're right.
You're right, Kay, because Bud just said, sorry, not my recommend. Needed this.
Oh,
And then he said, lots on our plate with packing, etc., getting ready for the house to go on the market, closing his business, and wedding planning. And then he goes, and I didn't read the book. Sorry to miss. So
Well, he should read it anyway, because I'm with Ken.
wow.
I took it on vacation with me last week, and I didn't get as far as I thought I would because it wasn't really a lazy vacation read. And I would go back and read it. And I read it on the Kindle, which has the advantage of being able to highlight a word and dictionary.com popping up, and sometimes
Yeah.
Wikipedia. And more than once I came upon a word that I could have guessed it from the context clues, but it was just such beautiful language. And it occurred to me, if you're ever going to write a story where your main characters are aspiring authors or poets, you gotta write like this.
yes, right.
So even though I know you guys are going to spoil the ending for me in a minute or two, I'm still going to read the rest of the book, because just the style and yeah, nothing against the modern authors, and some great stories and some great topics, and social issues and everything that we've read recently. But I don't know when the last time was that I read something written this beautifully.
I agree.
I was
Yeah.
constantly going to the dictionary and
Yep,
like learning
yes.
new words.
Yep.
What did you read the stuff about him as an author, you guys? I mean, they had a whole section in there about him and about all the books that he'd read and the awards that he's gotten and all that, and wondered if anybody'd read any of his other books.
I've read some of his other books, which I enjoyed thoroughly. He's written a lot about the West. I think they were nonfiction books, and so I really like this author. Therefore, I have a different reaction than it seems like on the majority of you. I read the first 10 chapters and I just couldn't follow it.
Yeah,
So I thought it was difficult to follow, so I gave up. But in general, this is a very good author.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, along with Carol, I read the book, and it didn't like grab me or anything. It wasn't the kind of thing that there wasn't too much action in it for me. I mean, I enjoyed when they capsized on the Lake Mendota in their boat. That was pretty cool. But yeah, it just wasn't my, and I know music and books are very subjective for different people. But yeah, for me, it wasn't like a true winner for me. But I did read it, and I did enjoy parts of it.
Rose, I'll give you this. I tried to explain to someone the other day about the book, and I was like, so there's these people and these couples, and they're professors, but they're writers, and they have this kind of compound, and then I'm like, I don't really know what the conflict is in the story. It's just their lives. It's just lives. And she's like, what are you reading? And I was like, I don't know, but it's really good. I just don't know.
Well, that's what I kept thinking, is that I didn't get the plot. Like, are we going somewhere in particular, or we're just following their life, or I kept waiting for a plot?
Yeah, this is not a plot. This is not a plot novel. This is a
life.
character novel.
Yeah.
This is a slice of life novel. It's just, it doesn't try to start somewhere and then engage you and then go somewhere and surprise you and end up somewhere. It just is a deep psychological kind of autopsy of these four people's lives in the ways that the four of them relate to each other. It's a psychological study. It's not a plot novel at all.
The characters were very complex,
Yes.
They were, you couldn't they were quite complex in thinking them through. So yeah, that was
I think I missed a lot of that, since I listened to it on double time all today.
Well, and the other thing is, especially if you were listening to it like that, you probably missed a lot of the author is also, he's an environmental conservative, he likes to what do you call it?
Conservationist.
Yeah, conservationist. And so tons of what he wrote about was including that kind of thing. And even when he when they would go out and be outdoors and stuff. It was all about that, because that's the kind of person that he is, you know, he cares about that a lot. So there's a lot of that in it too. What surprised you about the book? That there was no plot? What?
Yeah, that explains a lot. Thank you for enlightening me.
But there were words of wisdom in it.
Yeah, I heard something at the beginning too that struck me that way, but I can't remember what it is right now.
Yeah. Well, I found what was interesting to me was I found that this one and In Memoriam, the last book we read, they had a lot of literary content. And so I wondered if you guys thought about that at all too, and thought about some of the differences or the similarities between the book from that aspect.
Well, they
I
were
totally
both heavier
agree.
reads. They were not beach reads.
Oh, they were not
That's
beach
right.
reads
That's
for
right.
sure.
Mom's yelling at me. Coming.
The literary references, most of them went right over my head. But you're right, Cheryl. The comparison between this and In Memoriam is that these were people who, in the 20s and 30s, and both books are set, you know, very close to the same time.
Right.
In Memoriam is set like maybe 20 years before this one. Those people were classically trained, so that the references in their life were to classical literature.
Yes.
And mythology. The references in our lives are to 1950s comedies on television. And that's the difference, you know, between us and them. They all understood all of these classical references when they made them. You know, I looked up about half of them just because I was interested, and about half of them I just let them go over my head because I didn't know who they were talking about.
Yeah.
I like that part too, Ken. My partner Darlene was she wrote books, and my mother had a double major, mathematics and English, if you can imagine that.
Oh my God.
So at Darlene's funeral, my sister stood up and said, the most wonderful addition to our family in Darlene was that she was a true intellectual. Cynthia and I are both educated. My sister was a CPA, by the way, and she was did well in her life and everything. But she said Darlene and mother were intellectuals. She said, just like you just said, Ken, she said they'd sit in the living room and talk about what Burns would think about what was going on. And and the English authors in the English countryside, and these were two people that used literature, literary references.
Yeah.
And they bonded on that, and it was really fun to be around it.
Yes.
That's interesting. I've never been
I
around
just say
anybody like that. Really.
That I did know Cynthia's part. I did know Darlene for years and years and years.
Yes.
And as brilliant as she was,
Right.
as an author and as a scholar, she was entertaining. She knew
Very.
yes, she knew how to be light and entertaining with her brilliance and her knowledge. You know, she didn't bog you down in classical references.
No.
When she made them and used them, she told you what was going on, you know. And so her brilliance, instead of making you want to run to a dictionary or a thesaurus or a history book, you could stay in the room and laugh, because she knew how to tell you what she meant when she used all these references.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. That's a very good way of describing her.
That's
and
really
of course, my mother, when you talk about these women and their husbands and depending on them, my mother was, as I said, quite brilliant. And because of the war, because of the Depression, she had to cancel her plans to go to the University of Michigan. There was no money, so she went to junior college and then Western Michigan. But she taught for 5 years. And when she went in to tell her superintendent in 1940, that she was going to get married in June, this was in May, he said, well, of course, that means your resignation has to be on my desk, because she couldn't teach anymore, married.
Right. Yeah.
And so she devoted all her time to raising Jane and myself. and, was very enriching with all her other activities, church activities, etc. But what was interesting, and when we got into college, she was kind of a slump. And her doctor said to her, "Didn't you used to teach? And why don't you try it again?" She substituted for one year and went right back and taught 15 more years. She just loved to immerse herself, into. I asked her once, she was ordering Sports Illustrated. I said, "Mother, what are you going to do with that?" She said, "Well, Cynthia, in 8th grade, your only goal is to get the boys to read with the boys." And she said, "They will read this." So I use my discretionary funds to buy things like this because they will use them.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah.
they're getting boys to read. Yeah.
That's
So yeah, I know what you mean. But so again, her life was like these people. The wife had, my father had his own business, and there were good times and bad, but there was no chance that my mother was going to work. That was just not accepted.
Yeah.
Right.
You talk about her then getting Sports Illustrated for the boys, and that's an interesting point because, even that was a while ago and things have changed even more. And I think one of the things between this book and the last book we read, we talked about them being classically trained and literary, but also seen as manly men, and those not being two different things. So here we have these men who are chopping wood, backpacking and hiking, physically doing labor around the property, fixing the walls, figuring out the plumbing, where's the spring leaking, and they're literary. And we kind of got, I think there's this social construct now that you're either like that the plumber or the carpenter or whomever is not going to also be intellectual. And we had both here and in Memoriam men and boys who were both. And then we saw men's friendships in both. That I think so many
frankly, that accounts for a lot of the, shitstorm that we are in this country right now.
Bingo, Ken. Yes. Yeah. So it's really to look at that and to see, I guess it's a little sad having lost
and even the sports analogy I speak about, Sports Illustrated. I can't go anywhere now where there's a bunch of women, including my other book club last Saturday. People, and then when I go with young women, people are talking about Caitlin Clark because she's got the big basketball, goal, and it's women getting excited about women. And so even the sports area is all different, totally different now.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, we really have lost, haven't we, any of the literary, I don't know, this that aptitude, I guess, within the country.
I think the respect for it, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think I was ever around it that much. But when he wrote this book, he expected people to understand what he was talking about, as the author. He didn't, he was writing it, a while back, and he didn't felt like he needed to explain who they were or what they were about or anything. He just expected people to know what that was all about, so.
When was it written? I'm trying to get, someone has the book in front of me.
70s, I think, in the 70s. I'm pretty sure it was like 76 or something. It was one of his last books that he wrote. Yeah. In fact, it was his last novel. The only other book he wrote after that was short stories, I think. So.
And I thought it was sort of
87, Kay says 87. So it was later.
87, copyright 87. Yep.
Yeah.
Wasn't it kind of autobiography?
It's somewhat, most of his books, he says, are somewhat autobiographical. Yeah. But he never says, he says, there's no truth in them and they're full of truth, so he won't tell you what parts are what, like he just, but apparently he writes some of the same sorts of things or whatever. And he says, this is about a particular aspect of, life and probably some aspect of what he experienced,
I'm just doing math in my head. If he wrote it in 87, he's writing about a time like roughly 50 years ago. I wonder if somebody writing a book right now about the, late 1970s or the mid 1970s, if that look back is as as different, right? Just
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be totally different.
Yeah, it's more different, I would think.
Yeah, because think about it. I mean, this now it would be all about TV and stuff like that, you know, if he was writing about that 50 years ago, you know, nowadays, I mean, back then they didn't even have that, you know.
Well, you know what? Actually, I said that. Think about just the way the friendship forged in when they were in Madison, of them just popping over, being like, "Oh, we knew you didn't have a phone, so we just thought we'd stop by and see if you could go for a picnic."
Right.
If you're writing a
Yeah.
story now, you'd be like, "So
Right.
Sid texted Larry, but he was on the toilet, so he didn't respond right away." Like, what,
Yeah.
what would it be?
And the phonograph, right? I mean, how they sat and listened to music, you know, while Charity made them, but you know, Beethoven's Ninth played by so and so, you know, and after dinner, you know, so that was entertainment, you know.
I think
Or-
one of the in all the commentary that I read about this book, you know, reviews and the other authors talking about it and everything, one of the major themes that he was exploring was the dynamics of friendship as opposed to other kinds of relationships.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
there are lots of different kinds of relationships in the book, but this friendship, you know, what draws people to each other as friends, and what keeps them together through all kinds of experiences to the very end. You know, how do you find the people, and who are the people who become your friends? And with all the social media and everything that we have now, do those kinds of friendships still exist?
Yeah. Well, and these guys didn't always like each other either, right?
No,
I mean, there
they
was a
loved
lot
each
of,
other.
you
They
know,
loved each other. They didn't always like each other.
no, maybe, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I think you also see them, you know, when you have a friendship that long, you see each other's flaws, and they
Sure.
see that in each other's marriages. They
Right.
see each other's flaws, and that
Yes.
tendency to, like, sometimes take sides, but then sometimes be defensive. Of, you know, I'm blessed with some very, very good friends that have been friends for my entire adult life, and one of the couples is going through a divorce right now, and it's everyone kind of observing on what we've seen over the years and where it comes, and I'll be like, yeah, that's so, you know, some of the times when there was some tension that, you know, Larry was like, oh, do I make a joke now, or do I take Sid's side, or do I just shut up and let them have their own power struggle? And I you know, for me, that's very real in my group dynamics of my friendships.
Yeah.
My birthday was 2 days ago. I was 80 years old 2 days ago,
Uh.
and Paul Dodd my friend Paul Dodd has the same birthday I do. So we
Oh.
always celebrate together. And Paul and I have been friends for 62 years.
Wow.
We were fraternity brothers in college 62 years ago. And every time we say that, like in church last Sunday morning, they announced our birthdays and, you know, and all of that. And afterwards, what people said was, you know, how many things exist that long in the world today? How many things do you know, that lasts that long, in the world
Yeah.
today?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So you guys can share a lot of stuff about each other. You love each other. There's probably some stuff you don't like about each other.
And we know too much about
Yeah.
each other. Yeah, right.
Oh God.
Yeah, my
what
friend
kinda-
my friend Mel White always says, if you ever tell what you know about me, I will hunt you.
I will unfriend you on Facebook, right? Oh God. Well, his style of writing to me, I mean, I thought this is almost like, in some ways, he appeared to be doing almost like a journal and free forming back to, he'd think of a thought and he'd go back and go through that past experience. And then he'd go on to where he was at again. And then he'd think of another thought and he'd go back to that past experience. Did you guys feel that?
Yeah. But it said, when I read about the book, it said that's how it was written. So that didn't surprise me.
Yeah. And Larry's character as the narrator would multiple times anyway, I don't know if it was often, but I remember multiple times when even in the narration he'd say, well, I might be misremembering this, but here's how it colored my mind, and this might be an embellishment, but this is how it felt to me at the time. And I think that's what I enjoyed about the story in a yes, not having a plot and me not being able to explain to my friend what the hell I'm reading, but still I enjoyed reading it for that look back, like if I was storytelling, if Ken was to talk about his 62-year-old friendship, he'd get some details wrong, but the sense of it would still come through.
Yeah. It was interesting when he was sharing what Charity and Sid's first dating time was, and he says, I think it was probably about like this,
Yeah. He's like, I wasn't there, but it must have been like this.
I wasn't there, but it must have been kind of like this. From some of the
was
stories
funny.
What does the title mean to you? Crossing to Safety.
Gosh.
There's something in the very beginning and where he dedicates it, where he says something about it. Did you guys read that?
Yeah, it's a Robert Frost quote.
Yeah.
No.
But he was
I've got
also
the quote
talking
right here.
and
The quote
talking
says,
yeah.
I could give all to time except what I myself have held, but why declare the things forbidden that while the customs slept, I have crossed to safety with, for I am there, and what I would not part with, I have kept. It's very confusing.
I mean, if you think about it as kind of almost a real thing, it's like you stole something, or you slipped through customs with something that you shouldn't have taken with you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you got over, you crossed to safety with that item. Maybe he's talking about some memories or stuff that I don't know. I mean,
I think he's talking about this whole relationship, this whole
yeah.
this whole relationship of these four people that I had no right to this. I shouldn't have gotten away with this. There is a way in which I stole it from life and from the world, but I still did it. I got it. I crossed until I was safe with it and nobody could take it away from me.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I could make from it, because to me, it's a very confusing quote.
Yeah, it was. And that even the title was like, where did I was looking for it and waiting for something. And I kept thinking, oh, it's going to be about somebody dying and crossing over. No, it wasn't about that, so anyway, which character did you resonate with the most?
Ken, which one was it for you?
Oh, it had to be Larry. I had to be Larry because I was, yeah, I had to be me. It was Larry, yeah.
Anybody else?
I think I also put myself in Larry's shoes, but maybe just because he was the narrator making the observations, and I didn't particularly see myself in the other three main characters, and so Larry by default, I could,
Yeah, me too.
and maybe I do sometimes see myself in my friends as the observer of their antics.
Oh. How about the least? Which one were you like, oh, I couldn't resonate with that one at all,
You're on mute.
Did you resonate, Miss Cheryl?
Charity was pretty bossy, so that
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm only laughing because I'm like, oh, I guess I did resonate with Charity a little bit. I do kind of boss people around.
When I talked earlier about Charity being like just this mirror image of my ex-wife, one of the parts of her that made me feel that was her extraordinary empathy and care for people
Mhm.
who were hurting or needy or in. My ex-wife was just the most compassionate and empathetic person I've probably ever known. You know, she had this great big persona, you know, but she would cry at just the slightest sign of anybody being unhappy or in pain or needing something, you know, and she spent her whole life trying to help people and give to people, you know, and so that's what redeemed Charity's character to me.
Mhm.
Is that empathy and that compassion. Because yeah, in a way, y'all, she was a bitch. You know, she tried to control everybody's life, right down to where they went and what they did and what they ate and the time they got up, the time they went to bed and where they sat and, you know, and everything else. You know, but her heart was like pure gold.
She was
You know,
doing it for their
all,
own good. Right? She
all
was
of that.
thinking it was the best for them. She, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
She didn't do that for herself. She, everybody else could easily interpret that she was doing that for herself. You know,
Right.
that's the way it could look from the outside, you know, but from the inside, you know, all of that was real and genuine.
Yeah.
Mm.
How were the two marriage relationships similar or different? Oh, Kay, what were you saying, Kay? Speak that about Pritchard's camping manual. Come off mute though. There you go.
Well, when they start off on their week-long trek, not only have they checked the list umpteen times before they loaded it, but she insists that they unload it and make sure they have the tea. And then there was a instance where she was using the compass to figure out how to get where they needed to go next, and they ultimately had to go either backtrack or go a different way because that didn't lead them anywhere. So she was always sure that she was right, and she never, I mean, she wasn't even right about how the end of the story comes, in terms of, in my opinion, in terms of what it meant to other people. She was really only thinking about herself.
Yeah. It is hard to see from her perspective. She was thinking about, even at the ending, that part was, this will be the best for them, you know, but it really wasn't. And she was, you know, projecting that, right, from what she had. Yeah, that was interesting.
There was
I think
a line at the kind of near the end of that backpacking trek, but before Sally gets sick, that reflects on that. That refers to like how she'll follow, you know, the words of some so-called like expert author, but discount the expertise of the people around her.
Yeah.
And I know I've known people like that who are like, well, I've read. I'll be like, well, I've done it. Like, what do you want to do? And to, you know, it's something that I know I've been working on more, like drawing from the experience of people around me, people who've done things, and be open to learning new things in that way. But I took her as I just took her as being very insecure and having to prove herself to be the expert. I think that when people don't listen to other people, it's you know, a fear of looking weak and seeming lesser than. And so I just felt like she was always trying to prove herself by always controlling what everybody else was doing. And then she had moments when she'd apologize, but she didn't really change. She didn't really develop.
it's a deep-seated kind of insecurity, you know, that issues into that kind of need for control, for, you know, for sure. I think in terms of the difference between the marriages that you talked about, there's that conversation between the two husbands when they talk about the different ways in which they are chained to their wives.
Yes.
You know, I
Yeah.
think that kind of explains the difference between the marriages.
Mhm.
You know, that they agree that they are both chained to their wives, and almost submissive and subservient to their wives. But in one case, it's a choice and almost a joy, and in the other case, it's something else, altogether.
And because Larry's the narrator, we never hear what the women think of their husbands, do we?
Ooh, that
really
is
It just occurs to me right now.
I didn't really notice that, but you're right. They don't really talk about that much. It's always, you hear Larry and Sally talking about, Charity and Sid a lot, but you really don't hear the women talking about their husbands, do you?
Yeah, we know that they hang back on their walks a lot. We know they take a lot of time for girl time, but we don't know what they say to each other.
Yeah.
Wow. That would be an interesting.
Those bastards. Just kidding.
That would be an interesting midrash, right? The same era of time, but with one of the women as the narrator and their voices as primary. That would be.
So I got some fan fiction to write. I just need a thesaurus to find some big words.
There you go.
It'd be interesting to get the women.
Are there
Okay,
any books by women? Because of course, Larry being the male narrator, he couldn't speak for the women because he didn't know what they were saying to each other.
Yeah.
And the book would have had no authenticity whatsoever if the male narrator had pretended that he knew what the women were saying to each other. So he could only narrate, what he and Sid, were saying to each other, and knowing that the women were talking to each other. But are there novels that anybody's aware of where by women where you do get that kind of insight into what women are saying about their relationships and about their husbands?
Hold that thought for a minute, Ken. I wanted to hear what Rose had to say.
I just said, I just also agreed that it would be great to get the point of view from the women as well. That would have added totally new dimensions to the book.
Yeah. So then back to Ken. Are there books written like that? Well, they would have had to be kind of a similar type of psychology type of thing or something if there was going to be that kind of.
Well, not in a marriage that goes on for years, but I think of most of the novels of Jane Austen. She writes about how women feel about going into a relationship, how they feel in the relationship, and the women are constantly speaking to each other about what they want, whether or not they feel trapped, whether or not they feel loved, whether or not they're lucky enough to be in love. So
Jane Austen is the only one I could think of who is writing from that interior woman's point of view.
Interesting.
Rose, do you have a lightning storm going on behind you? It's so flashy. You're muted.
No, I do actually. You can see it. I had to run outside to make sure my windows were up, but yeah, we're getting a big storm there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there was a book called Olive Kitteridge. Has anyone read that? It came out a few years ago, but it's from the point of the view of a woman, and she's quite a character. She's very brash in some ways, but Elizabeth, I'd have to look up the author's name, Elizabeth something, but
Elizabeth Stout.
yes.
There you go,
have you
Kay.
read that?
Did you read it, Kay?
No.
Oh, yeah. One of my book groups did discuss it, and it was really, really well written and entertaining as well, because she happened to be kind of, always was trying to do something. Yeah, she was kind of forward in many ways, a different character. But she would talk about her husband and other things. There were like 12 different stories about her all in one book. So,
Wow.
I wonder if Hidden Figures is a book. The movie, we had just in the hotel the last couple nights, and it happened to be on Sunday night. And I, of course, was designing and said, don't watch that. Yeah, I've seen it 5 times. Every time I'll watch that movie. And it's so amazing. I've known if you haven't seen it, you must, it's these 3 black women, right, who were the computers at NASA, who basically got Neil Armstrong in the air and back to Earth. And it's the whole concept of an IBM computer coming out and actually making a mistake, interestingly enough. And it's all historical. I mean, I'm sure for the movie they did some wonderful upgrades, but it's Kevin Costner's in it. And I'm not sure if this part is true, but they had this massive IBM computer, and that was what was really computing. It was taking the job of all these black women who were mathematicians and scientists, you know, that worked for NASA. And when it came down to it, the IBM made a mistake, the computer. And Neil Armstrong said, go get that woman, you know, the smart one, he calls her. And if she thinks my numbers are good, we're going for Friendship 7. I mean, for the very first, he was supposed to do 7 orbits. And if you remember, he began to burn up. And she said, if he comes down now, it won't burn up. You know, he'll make it. And basically she gets him down, and if you remember, he survived and took 3 trips around the Earth instead of 7. And when Kevin Costner gave him the numbers, he said, okay, I'm good. And then Kevin Costner said, she just happened to compute the numbers a few more decibels than the big computer, like than the IBM. And it's just a great, like a mic drop line, you know. But that'd be an interesting book if it's written from their perspective. I'm not sure about that, but the movie sure tells it from the 3 of them from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Sidebar. Sorry, Cheryl.
Speaking of different books, is there anything else we'd like to say about this one before we start thinking about another one?
What's the name of that one you watched the other night? You were just talking about
Hidden Figures.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen it. I just couldn't think of it. I was wanting to
I
call
haven't
it
read it
numbers.
yet. It's actually on my list. I've seen the movie. Actually, I do want to read the book.
I do.
Hidden
That's what I was looking for.
I'm seeing the movie. I'm not seeing the book come up. Oh, hold on. Based on the book. There you go. By Margot Lee Shetterly.
Written by a woman. That's to
Yeah.
Ken's point. So a book from women's perspective, written by a woman. Way more credit. All right.
That might be significantly more uplifting than the stuff you've been reading. And less dense. Maybe less dense if there's not a lot of math in it. But it's one of the most inspiring.
I mean, it only covers like the light and fluffy social issues, like, you know, feminism and racism.
And the space race. And America versus Russia. Just some small things, Kristen. You know, nothing truly historic.
What's the matter,
Well-
Joby? You got something against books with Greek letters in them?
No, Barb, where are you?
I'm over here.
Are you with Ken?
Yeah.
She's sitting right beside me.
Oh, I was like, I heard her voice too. Where'd that come from?
Oh, Mom, that's Barb. No, I was just commenting on when I asked Cheryl today. She drove down to Lansing to pick me up. Hi, Barb. And we had a 2-hour drive down, a 2-hour drive back. And I said, what's the book actually about? You know, and she gave the same explanation that you did, Kristen. Gobbledy, 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 gobbledy. Oh, yeah, great. And then same as Cynthia. And the last chapter was really hard. It was really complicated.
Well, it was just intense. To me,
Right.
it was very,
Right.
very intense. I mean, I was trying to watch a TV show at the same time I was finishing the book, and I was able to do that till I got to the last chapter, and then I was no way I could focus on the TV, you know. So very, very intense. Yeah, that last chapter was what made me mad at Charity, you know, because I really felt like she really overstepped her bounds there with her husband, you know, not letting him, not being able to really empathize with where he was at and what he needed, you know, and even though she thought she knew, you know. So
But there's a line in the book, and this just is so profound to me. There's a line in the book that says, people who feel the need to control everyone else's life forget that all of those people have feelings too.
Right. Yeah.
And so what she was doing there, I hate to keep doing this, but this just is so existential for me. My ex-wife died about 3 feet from where I'm sitting right now. We had her, she was in a hospital bed here. She died in our living room here after a long illness. She had a blood illness, and she died right here in our living room right beside me. Her take on death was exactly Charity's take. I just want to disappear, and I don't want anybody to be hurt by it.
Ah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And yet it can come across as cruelty.
Yeah.
You know, in the book, Charity didn't want Sid with her because she didn't want him to be hurt by having to watch her die. And yet Sid needed to watch her die in order for the fulfillment of their relationship.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm.
All right, gang.
Time to pick what's next.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm going to offer something that's going to be really radical. It's not a novel. It's a nonfiction book. And we don't, I mean, I know you guys are mostly about fiction, but I just want to offer it because it's something that is kind of dear and near to my heart right now. It's called Thank and Grow Rich. And she's not talking about getting rich with money. This is about radical gratitude. And it's a book by Pam Grout. She's very, very funny. If you've ever read any of her books, she's funny as she writes it. And yet it's just almost every page you could, highlight something in it because of what she expresses and the importance of gratitude in making your life more wonderful.
That sounds good.
That sounds good. Something more uplifting. That'd be great.
yeah.
Quite uplifting.
As someone who's just launched her own business with a course called Budgets and Beliefs, I think I'm on board for reading this book. sounds
Go ahead. I was gonna say I have a title of a book maybe for another month or so, or for some time in the future. It's a multicultural book that was banned in a number of states, including Texas. It's called
Really?
Bless Me
It's
Ultima.
not hard.
And
It's called what?
It's called Bless Me Ultima. And it talks about, well, actually it's a novel by Rodolfo Anaya. Anyway, it's about a young boy, and as he navigates, I'm reading this part here, as he navigates the conflicts between his family's traditional Mexican culture and the modern world that he encounters. And it talks about spirituality in comparison to nature. It's a coming of age story, and it has gotten some rewards and things, or awards, I should say. And it's set in rural New Mexico during World War II. So, and it's a pretty quick read, but I have read it, and it does have a lot of different aspects. The thing about learning about good and evil, and questioning traditional religious values. In fact, the reason why it had been banned by some schools and also universities is because some people say it demeans organized religion, the Catholic Church in particular. But it's a nice, it's a good novel, I think.
It was also made into a movie, and the movie is really excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you spell his name? Bless Me Ultima?
I typed it in the chat. Bless
you
me
did?
Ultima or Ultima.
Ultima.
I'll put
Oh,
in
okay. Ultima. Yeah, just like it sounds. Okay. Or it's like it sounds if you were doing Spanish. Bless Me Ultima.
Yeah, I was just reading that one sounds good too. Also,
Well,
not a really new book.
when you were talking about things from a women's point of view, I went ahead, we had 3 books mentioned last time. And so when I finished this one, I went ahead and read the other 2, which were both very interesting.
Extra
But-
credit.
Overachiever.
One of the ones that I think we wanted to sometime read a novel that just flows very nicely, and yet it's so interesting, and it is from a woman's view. It's called The Women by Kristen Hanna, and it's all about a nurse in the Vietnam War, and all about what she experiences, a young woman, and all her experiences through the war and coming home, and it's all the 1960s and what it's like, and including the fact that she was so denied. In her parents, all the time she was in Vietnam, told their friends she was studying in Italy because they didn't think a girl should go over there.
Wow.
And
I've read good reviews about
this-
that one.
This is about the women who ran a really good hospital there, right?
right, they're all
Yeah.
nurses. They're all
Yeah.
nurses.
Yeah.
But
That's
there's two love experiences in there. I mean, and there's it's a well developed, but it reads easily, and you want to just go through it, but you feel immersed in the Vietnam situation from a woman's standpoint, which I had never read anything about that. And then coming home, she felt even more shunned than the men, because she would try to go to Vietnam vets groups, and they'd say, "You weren't really there. You weren't in combat." And she'd say,
wow.
yeah, I was working a 12-hour shift patching you guys up. But 'cause she did,
Wow.
it was right where the fighting was going on. I mean, it was written that way.
Yeah.
So that was another one. And then Hello Beautiful was the other one, which I don't know if it's a beautiful book about a big Italian family and all the things that go in different directions. It happened to be set in Chicago, so I knew a lot about where that was set, but so that's another book to consider, but it's a lot more about the characters. Each character is developed and so on. So both those books that were mentioned last time I found them to be very, very good.
Okay. Right now we have,
As
if-
usual, you have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 choices now.
Right.
So
yeah. So what are y'all thinking?
I'm gonna vote that you should do something a little lighter.
Yes, I
last
agree. I
two-
vote for lighter.
Yeah, your face is really, I mean, it's funny that some of you just loved this book, but you still had to work at reading it, right? It was
Mhm,
that
yeah.
kind
I
of
mean, I
intense.
used the dictionary, so yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna put my 2 cents of observation in, and since I'm not gonna read it, I'll hush now. And I'll facilitate your decision.
Okay.
So Pam Grout is a non-novel, and once you read anything of hers, you'll read everything of hers. Hidden Figures is a book, again, about women, by women, inspirational. Bless Me Ultima, that's written by a woman as well?
No, it's a man.
Okay, then Rose, that's next month, okay?
Ah!
Wednesday is Women's Month, Women's History Month.
Next month?
March is Women's History Month.
Right.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then
The women.
the women, Cynthia said, although my fear with the women is going to be, again, I imagine, Cynthia, the Vietnam War, was that a little bit intense?
It is intense, but
Kristen Hanna, that's
as I said, there's 2 love
easy to
stories in
read
there,
usually.
and it has a wonderful ending. So
As compared to this book?
yeah, yes.
As compared to this book.
I mean, but I guess I like to classify whether things are hard reads or easy reads. And again, you don't have to do it next time, but The Women is an easy read. It just flows.
Yeah. Someone make a case, and then you vote.
I vote for,
Think and Grow Rich is my vote.
yeah.
I agree with Carol. I would be interested next month in thanking Grow Rich.
Ditto.
Going nonfiction, let's do it.
So that'll be fun.
All right. Cool. I think you'll really enjoy it. She's quite funny.
Well, and
Okay,
there are also exercises, which
Well,
Cheryl,
not, and this one, I don't think there's so many exercises. That's
I
her
thought
other
there
two
were.
books.
I just,
Yeah.
I just read the description. It says like a 30-day challenge.
Yeah,
Well,
I
okay, yeah.
read this one years ago. You read it too years ago, and you've reread it now.
Yeah. So she's got two other books called E squared and E cubed that are actual experiments that you do and for 72 hours to prove that, God is out there. So
Oh, am I?
So we're going with the,
you want to do Think and Grow Rich?
yes.
Okay. All right. So
Who's
now
the author? Who's the author again?
her name is Pam Grout.
Okay.
Grout. And
Okay.
And they're Amazonable and they're Audibleable.
yeah. So you wanted 3/19, the 19th of March, or the 26th, which is in the middle of Holy Week. It's the only thing
Oh,
about that.
that's not good.
Yeah.
Let's do the 19th then.
The 19th? Because the only other option would be to wait till after Easter.
No.
Mm-mm.
No.
My
19th?
God, Cynthia just read 3 books in the time you all read one, and some of you didn't even read one. Okay, so
I barely got this one done. So. All right. So Think and Grow Rich on the 19th. Are you guys good with that?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
but
All right.
before you
Let's
leave-
save these other books because let's come back to these 3. Bless Me
Yeah.
Ultima, The Women,
What
Hidden
about the naked
Figures.
one?
and The Hidden Figures. All right.
and the Naked Don't
Okay.
Fear Water. Kelly, we didn't
What?
hear from you. Kelly had one in here too called The Naked Don't Fear the Water.
Ooh,
I didn't see that one.
Cheryl, Cheryl's like,
scintillating.
Kelly, what's that one about?
Naked Don't Fear the Water. Oh.
It's I haven't read it, but I have it on my list to read. It's about Afghan refugees and their trail, or
Their plight.
yes.
Yeah. Once
Cool.
again,
And they must be naked, so they don't fear the water. So
Mm.
or there's a
All
play
right.
on words there, Kelly. I do want to offer a little commercial because if you're going to be online with us on the 19th, which is a Tuesday in March, 8 days later, we are doing Sanctuary Seder, which is actually our anniversary of when Sanctuary Online was born, was right during COVID, if you remember, March 13th. And we had Seder planned on the property because you never did anything else except on the property. And we that year we chose to throw spaghetti against a wall and see if we could do it. And we did Sanctuary Online with our phones, and holy cow. But we did the Seder online, and then we kept going. And that is really the birthplace of Sanctuary Online. So all y'all
4
are
years
invited,
ago.
and that is the 27th, Wednesday of Holy Week.
oh, not on a Tuesday. Gotcha.
It's a Wednesday.
Okay.
Yep. All right. And
is it at 7:00?
I don't have that written down. Barb or Cheryl or Ken?
Don't remember. We'll have to advertise it, Joe.
Yeah, we'll have it on the Facebook page. Kristen will have it on the Facebook page, on the
As soon as you
website.
tell me when it is.
As soon as I give
As soon as we
Kristen the
figure it
information.
out.
You guys
Yeah.
see how we're working? It's getting better, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Step at a time, hon. Step at a time.
All right. Thank you all. That
Thank
was
you.
an
The
excellent
cruise.
conversation. Really appreciated it.
Thank
And
you.
the crew,
Don't forget a commercial for the cruise.
Yep. And Cynthia, I'll get you that email. I just need a day to sleep.
Yeah, and I'll give you a call on the phone. I want to tell you a couple other things.
Okay, tomorrow or the next day?
Yeah, good. Okay, yeah.
Ken,
bye,
what'd you have?
everybody.
Bye.
And
Bye
thank
bye.
you.
All.